Morning, everyone. So today is the first stage of the final bit of the Rwanda Safety Bill's passage through the House of Commons. There's sort of committee today, so it's amendments today, and then it's the final debate and vote tomorrow. I'm just going to actually cut our super chat we've had right from the start, because I'm going to have to disagree with it. So Steve Kirk here, £9.99 super chat. Thank you very much. This morning, Phil. Obviously, as we know, this bill is nothing more than government-sponsored people trafficking. But can the same people be sent back? Could Rwanda just bounce them back after 6 months or so? So, first of all, the bill is nothing to do with it. The bill, as stated, you could argue, is basically people trafficking. But what the bill actually is very different. But I'll come to that in a moment in terms of answering your other question. So, shall we say hypothetically, if this bill passed through Parliament and the court said either we're fine with it, or oh dear, you seem to have stopped us having a say in the matter. So in other words, if the plan could be enacted, right, can Rwanda send them back? Absolutely, because the way the plan works, if you read it, if you actually read the Rwanda agreement, not what the Daily Mail say about it, the process is as follows. We send some people trying to seek asylum, we send them to Rwanda. In Rwanda, they process their claims. If the Rwandan authorities decide, oh, you've got a valid claim for asylum, then the idea is they're supposed to stay in that concentration camp they've been building in Rwanda, right? If, however, the Rwandan authorities say, no, we're not satisfied that you have a valid claim for asylum, then they send them back to the UK. So that is exactly what happens. Yes, they send them back to the UK. Now, it's entirely dependent on the Rwandan authorities deciding whether or not that asylum claim is valid. So they could easily send loads back, almost all of them back. They could say, no, the paperwork's no good. No. And just send them all back if they want to. However, the bill is not about that. That is the stated intention of the bill, but that's not what the bill's all about. The bill is a fight between different factions in the Tory party for whether or not the Conservative Party respects human rights. I'm going to point out a few things here. First of all, despite what they say, no major faction in the Conservative Party wants the Rwandan plan to work. As in, I don't mean work as in stop the boats. It's never going to do that. They don't even want to send refugees to Rwanda. How do I know this? They don't have a plane. So in terms of, when they talk about, oh, they want the flights to set off, you need a plane to do that, right? Now, you've got one of two ways to source that plane. The first way is the obvious way, which is that you get a commercial airline to say, we're going to give you a government contract to send these people on these dates and so on. According to reports, I haven't gone around asking every airline, but according to reports in the Times as well, which is a Tory paper, no commercial airline wants that contract because of the reputational damage. So the government cannot use commercial airlines to carry out this contract, right? So that leaves the Ministry of Defence. It means the government have to sort it out themselves. Now, the Ministry of Defence have said, yeah, we can't do that because we do not have a secure airfield. Obviously, the purpose of this Rwanda Safety Bill is not to make it legal to send people to Rwanda. We know that's not the case. In fact, someone has just mentioned that the UN has declared the treaty illegal. So the Rwanda plan is illegal. Our Supreme Court have said so. The UN have said so. It's illegal, right? In domestic and international law. So the only way the government can get flights going in theory is to bypass the courts. In other words, it's illegal, but we don't care, right? So that's going to generate a lot of protest. There's going to be a lot of people going, actually, we're going to defend the law. There'll always be people who would want to stop these flights anyway because they're inhumane, right? But there could be more people because now they've got the extra justification that it's also illegal. So anyone deciding to try and disrupt that flight is acting to protect the law. They're acting, actually, to prevent a crime. Well, at least a breaking of the law. I don't know we'd call it a crime, but breaking of the law, right? So you would need an airfield that had the security to stop a large-scale protest trying to block the airfield, the runway. So the MOD don't have such an airfield, and they've said it would cost something like about 20 million to make it secure. Now, here's how we know the government are not serious about sending anyone to Rwanda. They haven't been given that money. The MOD say it's not coming out of their budget. It's Home Office. This is a Home Office issue. They say the Home Office can pay for it. The Home Office don't want to pay for it. Now, you may say, but that's because Rishi Sunak and James Cleverly don't really believe in it. No, that's absolutely true. But why didn't Suella Braverman pay for it when she was Home Secretary? Why didn't she? The sum needed is a fraction of the cost she's been sending to the Rwandan government. Why didn't Suella Braverman stump up the money for the MOD to secure the airfield? It's because she doesn't believe in it either. No one believes in it. No one wants to send these refugees to Rwanda. It's all about that. Everyone needs this bill to fail. You know, it's the far right wanted this plan because it couldn't possibly work. They knew it couldn't possibly work. They knew it would mean a run-in with the authorities. Sorry, my other monitor's just gone dead there for a minute. Have I knocked it off or something? The other... Oh, it's gone. Sorry, I lost my train of thought. My monitor's just turned off and I don't know where the button is to turn it back on. Where was I? Yeah, the far right don't want this plan. What they want is a running with the courts so they can say, oh, the courts are blocking us from protecting our borders. Therefore, we need to either be able to ignore the courts. It's like, oh, the courts should be for the little people. The government should get to ignore the courts. Or should we just get rid of all human rights? Because actually, we're fine with the courts for most things, even though they're not. Should we just get rid of human rights laws? That's what they're basically wanting. So it's a battle within the Conservative Party for that. The other thing to note, unfortunately, now I'm a bit snookered because I've lost my monitor, my other monitor, is so today's job is it's the committee stages, really. So today's job in Parliament is amendments. And there have been 2 amendments put forward, one by Bill Cash and one by Robert Jenrick. Robert Jenrick was the former immigration minister. And there's the various news that, like, there's news that last night it was 63 Tory MPs had signed these amendments. Now, that sounds quite a lot, but I want to point a couple of things out. So first of all, it also includes, I think 6 was the last time I heard, people on the payroll, so to speak. So these are either people like Brendan Clark-Smith and Lee Anderson, who are deputy party chairs. So they're not ministers, not members of the government, but they do get extra money, which we pay for, I think. But they do get extra money, as well as actual members of the government. Now, that should mean that they should resign, but they're not resigning. So they're basically forcing, Sunak to sack them or not. So Sunak straight away has a challenge to his leadership in that if he doesn't sack Brendan Clark-Smith or Lee Anderson, he looks weak. But you could argue he already looks weak, so maybe he won't care. Or he sacks them, you know, from their non-jobs anyway, triggering a bit of a firestorm. So we'll see what he does. I suspect he'll just back down because he's a coward. But again, this number 63 sounds like a lot. It's actually not a lot. It is enough if all of those people. So first of all, their amendment's going to fail. I'm not even going to tell you what's in these amendments. Do you know why? Because I've not bothered to look it up. There's no point. It doesn't matter what's in them. You know, it's utterly irrelevant. They're going to fail. When they're presented to the House of Commons for a vote, which is those amendments should be voted on today, I think, or is that tomorrow? I'm not sure. It might be that all the votes are tomorrow. I'm not sure. But they're being debated today. When they are presented to MPs, MPs are going to vote them down. The opposition MPs are going to almost all vote them down. I don't know whether any of the DUP or the Tory independents would support them. Andrew Bridgen might, who knows? But he might not. But basically, the opposition MPs are going to vote it down. Rishi Sunak is not formally adopting it as part of the government, so most Tory MPs will also vote it down. So you're not going to get very many people voting in favour of it. The other thing to note about this 63 is it's about half of all of the Tory MPs that could be considered on the far right. In other, half of the Tory MPs who want this Rwanda plan, or they say they do. They don't really, but they say they do. So why? So you're saying to it, oh, 63 signatures, that's quite a lot. It's like, for something this crucial, it's not. For something this important, or that they say is this important, it's really not. Why aren't there 100 signatures? So that means there's loads of Tory MPs who may well be government ministers and are not signing it, or just otherwise can't be asked to sign it. So we'll see how many vote, but I suspect not many. So the real key question is not about the amendments. The amendments are going to fail. Absolutely certain they're going to fail. Sue Davenport's $4.99 super chat. Thank you very much, saying that Labour social certainly you can. That's a little message to Graham there. The key question is, will these Tory rebels, or the ones on the far right, when their amendments are sunk, so they have to then say, well, this bill we don't think is good enough, right? That's what they're having to say. By supporting these amendments, their stated aim to support these amendments is the bill cannot work in its current form, so we have to amend it like this. So the amendments will be defeated. So then they have to say, are we going to vote for a bill that we don't think is any good, or are we going to abstain or block it? Now, if all 63 of those Tory MPs who signed the amendments abstain, the bill probably fails. Obviously, it all depends on like other things as well, but it probably fails. If, however, there about half of that number vote against it, then it also again probably fails. So you sort of need, I think, probably to be on the safe side, nearer 40 MPs voting against it, Tory MPs voting against it, because obviously opposition MPs will almost all vote against it. There will be independents that were former Tories that will vote for it, and some of the DUP may vote for it as well. So there will be some opposition voting for it. So it's really a case of, you know, probably nearer 40 Tory MPs have to vote against it. Will they? I suspect not. And the reason I suspect not is because we saw there was very little opposition to Sunak at the last vote. It really, I mean, you know, we weren't expecting it to be blocked at the last vote. We were expecting it to be run close, and it wasn't. I think the situation is this. It doesn't help them to block the bill, because Sunak will be arguing with them privately that it's better to let it go through and then let Labour block it in the Lords. They'll say it won't be Labour. It'll be because Labour don't have a majority in the Lords. In fact, Labour don't even have as many peers as the Tories do. The Tories have more members of the House of Lords than Labour do, but they will blame Labour if the House of Lords starts being difficult with it. And let's say it goes through the House of Lords, which I can't see in its current form. Again, I don't think the Lords will block it, but I think they will try and amend it even from where it is now to make it more explicitly clear that actually you can't ignore the courts. But we will see. Let's say the Lords do let it pass through. So then there's the issue with courts challenges. Rishi Sunak reckons he's going to get 150 judges to sit on weekends and in the evenings, so that when individual cases are brought against the Rwanda plan, that they can be heard really quickly. So there's no like getting stuck in the courts for ages. Also, Rishi Sunak has claimed that if the European Court of Human Rights orders injunctions against deportations, that he will ignore them. Again, he won't. Rishi Sunak has made it clear that he is not interested in breaking international law. Not that he has respect for international law, but he's not interested in breaking it. The idea that Rishi Sunak will ignore a judge on the European Court of Human Rights, to me, is ridiculous if you look at his past behavior. So I am going to suggest that, again, this is evidence that he knows the bill is fundamentally never going to see the light of day. He doesn't have planes. He's not tried to get planes. He said he's going to ignore the European judges that were reported by some as EU judges. Remember, they're not EU judges. The European Court of Human Rights, nothing to do with the EU. The EU is a member just like we are, but it's not part of the EU. But there we go. We should be able to call for a general election after 4 years. Well, no. I mean, there's two ways to do it. Either you have fixed terms, but we can't. I don't see any way we can have fixed terms. I don't think you can actually fix it in a way, because if it's possible, like the Tories tried to fix it, and then it's quite weird. We had the Fixed Terms Parliament Act, which was supposed to do that, and then that was in law. And then in 2017, we had an election after 2 years. Then 2019, we had an election after 2 years. So, and then we repealed it. And then we're going to have an election after 5 years. It's really weird, isn't it? We put this law into place that says, oh, we should have elections really every 5 years. And then it's like, yeah, we're going to have one 2 years later. Oh, we're going to have another one another 2 years later. Oh, let's repeal that act so it doesn't exist anymore. You can have elections when you like. Oh, we're going to now have it 5 years. British politics. But anyway, Labour should call the Tories bluff and vote for it. Good God, no. No, it's horrendous. The actual bit, because we go back to the original comment, the bill as stated is people trafficking. There's no way Labour can support it. And Labour have very clearly come out against it. You know, there are some things, some bad things that Labour have had to support because it's got public approval. This doesn't have public approval. You know, there's various groups trying to go, oh, there's this policy, the public want this Rwanda bill strength and stuff like that. It's all crap. It's all absolute rubbish. The public, I'm not saying the public are, you know, oh, this is cruel and we shouldn't be doing it, it's breaking international law. Don't get me wrong. There's a significant portion of the public who would absolutely go away with the basics of the Rwanda plan. It's just that they're not impressed with the fact it's breaking the law. They're not keen on the government breaking the law. So the Rwanda plan now does not really have public support. It certainly doesn't have public support amongst Labour's target voters. The fact that it does amongst some of the Conservatives' target voters is not Labour's issue. So Labour they're quite happy just blocking it. They don't care what Sunak says. They don't care if Sunak blames Labour peers in the House of Lords either, because, you know, I mean, there's two things about that. First of all, Labour are really clear on this one in a way that they're not on most policies. They're super clear. We will trash the Rwanda plan. It's crap. It's expensive crap, and we're going to get rid of it. And the second thing is, wouldn't it be hilarious if Rishi Sunak tried to stand up in PMQs one time and said to Keir Starmer, oh, we had this plan to stop the boats and your unelected peers in the House of Lords blocked it? Wouldn't it be great if Keir Starmer just stood up and said, oh, sounds to me like you're saying we should abolish the House of Lords? Unfortunately, I bet he doesn't, but that would be hilarious. But anyway, did I see the Parliament have to debate the petition calling for a general election soon? Yes, that's at the end of this month. So there was a petition calling for a general election sooner rather than later, saying we shouldn't be having to wait for January 2025. The way these things work, if a petition gets to, for the House of Commons, gets to 10,000 signatures, then there has to be a response from the government. And if it gets to 100,000, there has to be a debate. Well, it's over 200,000 now. So yes, that debate is at the end of the month. I think it's the 29th or something from memory, but it is at the end of this month. The other thing as well, just in terms of general housekeeping, is the by-elections that have been moved are going to be on the 15th of February. So that's Wellingborough and Kingswood. Kingswood, the interesting thing about that, so that is the one that was caused by Chris Skidmore standing down for principled reasons, because he can't support the government's anti-net zero policies now. Interestingly, the Conservatives had a meeting to select their candidate, and they did, I gather, but there was hardly anyone in attendance. Now that's surprising. You can understand if it's a no, like obviously the Conservatives, just like Labour, they select candidates for every seat in Britain. And you can understand some of those seats you've got no chance of winning, right? So most party members, it's like, you know, you don't really care who your candidate is because they're not going to win. This is a Tory seat. It's a Tory seat. and hardly any Conservative Party members in that constituency turned up to vote for their candidate. That's sort of an indication that they really don't fancy their chances of winning it. And the other thing to note is the absolute easiest thing you can do as a party member is turn up to a meeting to select a candidate. Even I do that. It's only your most dedicated that will go to knocking on doors, all the usual stuff, all the, put it this way. If there's hardly anyone, there was something like about 20 odd people turned up to that meeting. If there's hardly anyone would turn up to a meeting to select the candidate, I'm going to bet there's hardly anyone will turn out for them to knock on doors handing out leaflets. And here's the thing, it's quite cold today, really cold. Actually, we've got snow outside. So it is very cold. And the by-election is now going to be in basically a month's time. It's going to be quite cold between now and then as well. Now, it's a big ask at any time to ask people to volunteer their time to wear out their shoe leather, knocking on doors, handing out leaflets. I am going to suggest if you've got a local party of activists who can't be asked to turn up to a meeting where it's probably quite warm, certainly warmer than outside, then they're probably not going to go around in the winter, biting cold, bitter cold, knocking on doors. So I think they're not going to put up much of a challenge in Kingswood either, by the looks of it. So it looks like, Sunak has a little bit of a headache this week. I think he'll get through it, only because I don't see the logic in the far right blocking Sunak on this. And I'm not getting any sense from journalists that there's really the appetite. Because the bottom line is we talk about the far right, but they're not united at all. They're spread across 5 major factions. They're not at all united. So what will happen is just like last time, the ERG and the New Conservatives will say, well, these amendments have been defeated, so the bill is not fit for purpose. We should vote against it. And the Tories on the far right will ignore them and vote in favour of it anyway. It'll be interesting if any, I suppose some will vote against it. Simon Clarke said he'll probably vote against it. It'll be interesting to see how many. Be interesting to see if it's more than voted against the Windsor Framework. That would be quite interesting. One Angry Pagan saying, why do I keep hearing that economists have said there's a rizzlers with difference between Labour and Tory economics policies? I don't know which economists you're referring to, but they're not the ones that are talking about it in, say, the Financial Times or the Economist or Bloomberg or any of the sort of credible papers on this. I don't know who you're referring to. It may be conservative economists, ones who aren't independent. Or is it independent economists from like Tufton Street? Now, there are certain aspects, like Labour have, for example, said that they're going to, well, they have, actually, no, that's not true. I was going to say they've said that they will stick to the Tories' fiscal rules. However, they haven't actually said that. They've said that they will stick to fiscal rules. So they've given themselves enough room to change what those fiscal rules are. Whether politically they can is another matter. But that's it. In terms of actual economics policy, they're night and day. They're clearly night and day. Business groups have said they're night and day. Unions have said they're night and day. And the economists that I read, because I read the Financial Times, if I'm going to read about economic policy, the thing about the Financial Times is, yes, it's not left-wing by any stretch of the imagination. It is basically, if you had to say, is it pro-Tory or Labour, it's pro-Tory. But at the same time, they have to tell the truth to their readers. This isn't like the Daily Mail or the Telegraph that are just offering opinions. The Financial Times report things in a way that their customers make financial decisions on the back of. So they have to give them reliable information. So the Financial Times is basically not going to lie to its readers. We'll laugh if Labour's amendment is passed. Oh, yeah, I mean, that's not going to pass. No, it doesn't sound to me like any amendments are passed. I wondered if there might be a token amendment, an amendment that doesn't really do anything, but that Rishi Sunak, because he said he's going to take amendments seriously, I thought he might have tried to get someone to present an amendment, that he agreed to adopt just as a token, just to show, oh yeah, okay, yeah, you make a good point, yeah, we'll do this, even though it's an amendment that does not a lot. But it doesn't sound like he's even doing that. It doesn't sound like he's even doing that. Suspect that the Tories are going to be making a lot of plays like that one to convince people that all politicians are the same. It's one of the very few things they have left. It is basically one of the few things they have left. You know, at the end of the day, they are, and the further to the right, they even sound like they've been. Like, here's the thing, right? Rishi Sunak's is not actually going to allow his party to break international law. He sounds like it, but the fact that he sounds like he is makes people think that that's what the party stands for. And so this tilting to the right is actually tilting them further away from where most swing voters are. And it's really going to work out very badly for them. And we had all the news about the YouGov poll yesterday, which the Telegraph made up a load of stuff about, but the actual poll then came out later on. It's very bad news for the Conservatives, because just to be clear about what the MRP poll from YouGov says, and obviously it is a snapshot. The field work took place across December and a little bit into January, and we know public opinion can change a little bit now and then. It goes up and down, but ultimately, sorry, just a comment there. Someone saying, did I see no more hanging EU flag without planning permission? No, that's bollocks. I'll look it up in a bit just for a laugh, but that's rubbish. You know, my neighbour's got a flagpole. If they decide to fly the EU flag on it, they're going to fly the EU flag on it. There's no one going to tell them otherwise. So I don't believe that at all. Apart from anything else, could you imagine how ridiculous it would be if Michael Gove's department, because it would be Michael Gove's department that would do that, if he wasn't implementing housing targets, he wasn't getting houses built, but he was spending his time legislating to tell people what flags they can and cannot fly on their flagpoles. So no, I think you've probably happened across something in the Daily Express there, but I will check it out later when I can get my monitor working again. Sorry, I completely forgot what I was talking about before as well. Oh, last one, just a slight, or one of the last ones. We'll get some general questions. Do I think the latest attacks on Ed Davey regarding his time as Post Office Minister will have any effect on potential Lib Dem seats won and tactical vote? So it's an interesting question. First of all, what I will say is, in Ed Davey's defense, first of all, no one's really saying he did anything wrong. Like I've said from the start, I'm not blaming any politician of any party. This is the fault of individuals who weren't politicians, who deliberately created miscarriages of justice, and they should be made responsible. And the focus should be on them. The focus should be on them and on criminal investigators and the Crown Prosecution Service to now prosecute those people, right? However, in terms of Ed Davey, he was Post Office Minister for 2 years. The scandal was ongoing before, although we didn't know about it, but it was happening. The injustices were happening before he was Post Office Minister, and they were happening after he was Post Office Minister, and we found out about them after he was Post Office Minister, right? So it's sort of, you know, even as a Labour supporter, I will say this is really very unfair on Ed Davey. He has taken a reputational hit as a result of it as well, which is what makes it particularly unfair. And what I will say is the same polls that show that Ed Davey has taken some personal flack for this show that the Lib Dems have not. Now, my argument would be, when people are looking at party leaders, if Keir Starmer or Rishi Sunak suffer reputational damage, that is bad for the party, because the voters are seeing them as they're saying, which one do we want as Prime Minister? So any reputational hits to those is serious for their parties. For the Lib Dems, I'm not saying the leader doesn't matter. Of course, the leader matters. But people know that Ed Davey is not going to become the Prime Minister. So when people are deciding to vote Lib Dem, in many cases, particularly if it is tactical voting, in many cases, it's not Ed Davey that's first and foremost in their minds. It's do they want a Lib Dem rather than a Tory MP? That is mostly what people are thinking. So really, I don't think it's going to be that serious. And at the moment, polling suggests that the Lib Dems have not suffered as a result of it as well. It's just Davy's personal reputation. But there we go. Right. So Mike's saying, following the UK's departure from the European Union, the flag of the European Union is no longer included in the list of flags that do not require consent. I'll check it out, but I strongly suspect if you're going to try and say that my neighbour can't fly an EU flag, that won't be true. And also another thing, that statement suggests, well, we'll come to that later, but we will see. I bet that's not true. I bet it's not as being described, should we say? Should we put it that way? It might apply to public buildings. Are you sure this isn't public buildings? In which case, ones in Scotland, I suspect, will carry on doing it anyway and dare them to do anything about it. Because apart from anything else, it's up to them. Peter saying, supposed outrage that sub-postmaster has been denied a fair hearing used Dave, denying Davy a fair hearing, just hypocrisy. Well, it is. I mean, the stuff that's coming out is the people responsible, people at the post office, people at Fujitsu, even some lawyers. We're getting evidence that some of the lawyers who were prosecuting deliberately tampered with evidence. Why aren't they being investigated? Like we've had a barrister or a solicitor. No, it would have been a barrister who was quite happy to tell the inquiry this week, oh yeah, I tampered with evidence. We had this evidence that suggested that I had this evidence that would have been useful to the defense. And not only did I not pass it on to the defense, but I tampered with it for submission to court as well. Well, what? How can you bold as brass just say that to a court? And he tried to use the old Tory incompetence argument. It's like, oh, I wasn't trying to be corrupt. I just had a lot on. It was very busy and I made a poor decision. No, these people should be investigated for like whatever it would be in terms of perverting the course of justice. That's where the focus should be. Instead of this party political football game, the focus should be on the people who deliberately, mindfully destroyed people's lives. But there we go. But I will. I'll leave it there for now. Anyway, thank you very much. We'll find out more shenanigans later on. As I say, I wouldn't get too. Tomorrow will be the big showdown. The amendments are going to fail. It sounds to me like there isn't even a token one, but the amendments haven't technically, I suppose, been quite selected yet. The speaker will select those later. But I strongly suspect and yes, Freckle Pune is saying that the EU flag is also that of the Council of Europe, which they're still a member. Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. So you just say, oh, it's not an EU flag, it's Council of Europe flag. Unless I suppose you had EU written in the middle of it. But if it's just the normal flag, yeah. But then we'll leave it there. As I say, don't expect too many shenanigans today. We'll have a bit of posturing today, but the amendments will fail. Tomorrow is when the vote will happen. I think Sunak will win the vote because I don't think it's because it will cause a proper meltdown, And I don't see how it's in the right wing, the far right's interest to do that, but we will see. But thanks very much anyway. Thanks for coming on. Don't forget to click the like button and to subscribe. And until next time, I will see you later.